What's up, everyone? This is Ignatius. Today I'm bringing to you a video to show you the build that I've been running to clear the temples extremely efficiently. This build is not something that is brand new. However, I've made some unique techs to others' ideas, and these techs effectively make the build better in temple and make the build more affordable. And I'll talk about sort of all of those things at length. Just as a quick introduction, this is a Blood Mage Spark cast on crit Annihilator. You'll have seen Fubgun run this build, but at a budget of, I'm guessing, like maybe 5 mirrors on his build. I also want to give a shout out to a creator most people don't know about called Glitched. He is always doing insane stuff every season, and he was targeting this build before the season started. He currently has a 10 mirror version that is absolutely insane. I will tag him in the description. Go check him out. Get to know him. He's a fantastic creator. All right, again, with the intro, I've done 3 things to this build that are pretty unique. One is an insistence on Lightning Warp and Cast on Crit, and I'll show you why this is absolutely amazing and why it should be considered required for everyone in this build, and I think everyone will use it eventually. Number 2 is leveraging Blind. Blind often gets skipped in Spark Assumptions because it doesn't show up in any of the recommended gems, but lots of blind effects work on spells and attacks. And when you start to look at the synergies between them and then look at what they can contribute to critical hit chance and critical hit damage, you'll realize that it's an amazing, amazing tech that saves you efficiency on the tree, in gems, and in your gear. And then lastly, affordability. I've just done a lot of things to make the build still an absolute juice temple clearer, but at a budget that I would say, like if you drop Headhunter and Olroth, which you totally can, you're at 20 div or less, and then Headhunter and Olroth combined, add like 130 div to the build. Now keep in mind, it is the new year. It's January 1st, so divines are inflating like crazy. Olroth was like 28 divine maybe like 4 days ago, so it's just going crazy. The value of divines is dropping through the floor with what's going on in the temple. But yeah, just kind of rough like budget comparison between the mirror tier versions of this build and then what you'll see me do. And I don't think there's too much of a drop off in the clear speed, in the damage, or in the rarity. I am running 142 rarity in this iteration. So yeah, I thought you'd enjoy it. Now, in most of my build demos, I've been saving showcases for later. Right now, I'm right here in a temple, and I'm going to go run down this tier 3 room with these mods. We've got 204 effectiveness on humanoids, and then just like, you know, a lot of other temple mods. My temple's not going crazy yet. Like this is probably a quarter of the way in terms of difficulty, but you'll see that even before the Headhunter buffs apply. And also I do this P2 with a Gravebind character who's on my buddy, and so he soaks up all the buffs, and I have no Headhunter buffs. I don't swap belts. It still works fine. So let me hop in here and clear one room. You can just watch, and then I'll go in the next room and tell you like what's going on and how the gameplay works and what you should actually do. You know, I think everybody's kind of seen this type of build at this point. There's nothing super innovative in this build, but there is something that I really enjoy. So one thing I really like about what I've done with this build is that with Spark on right click and Spellslinger on middle click, you can kind of just teleport to the middle of the room and hold down right click, and the build does the rest for the most part. The exception is proximal tangibility minions, and you might see some of those lingering. I think this one over here was. But yeah, it's a super, you know, not the vision type build, but it's cool to get to this place many weeks into the season. You'll see these skills here, and like you can spam them if you want. They add value. This one activates Archon. This one gives you infusions and implied exposure. This one's just a lot more crit procking. But let me unbind them, and you'll just see how it works. So I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to teleport to the middle and hold down Spark. I won't even do the Spellslinger. Again, I'm just holding down right click, nothing else. All right, I got kind of trapped over here in this corner. Yeah, there were some minions coming. Oh, proximal. So there's the proximal example. Let's see what else is here. A couple guys. There we go. All right, I had to blink one time to clear that room. Let me go into the next, and I'll do kind of the same thing. into the middle, hold down right click, just kind of spinning around. You don't have to spin around, like Scions will do it, but you know, just for the sake of it. Okay, we're stuck. One blink. Let's see where we're at. Probably a proximal minion out there. I actually couldn't see what he was. Yep, proximal minion. So this is the only thing that doesn't get cleared is the proximal minions. And it wasn't my goal to have like a one button build, but I think I'm trying to show that on, you know, a massive fraction of the budget, we've got this Spark Blood Mage going. And this took 2 days to build because when you get your temple going, you can level to 97 in like a couple hours solo, which is ridiculous. But yeah, I've got the skill bar unspec'd. You don't really need any of that stuff. There's some utility to it on map bosses, I think. And then, you know, if you wanted to take this build to something else besides the temple, then sure, you can spec for more boss DPS if you want to. Obviously not necessary in this content. And you can see I'm like way over-tuned, right? So as this temple gets stronger, this character will get stronger. Okay. I'm going to stop there with the gameplay and just talk about like what's really going on with this build. If I can manage to get my character to somewhere where it's quiet. Okay. There we go. All right. What's going on with this build? What can I teach you? So my main goal in creating this video is to show people not only how powerful Cast on Crit Spark is in the temple, but that it is not unattainable, because the budget of the other creators' builds is unattainable, and at first glance it looks like, oh, I can't run that build. That is ridiculous. You've got the Gloom Sceptre, which is like, you know, hundreds of divs. You've got that silly Vertex helmet, which is like, I don't even know how much. You've got Temporalis, which is like 2 mirrors. The build is, and then all the rare gear slots, and the wand is like a mirror tier 1. It's all insane. I would say the most valuable item on all of this gear for like just consistency of the build is Olroths. And Olroths is really expensive, and it's a flask. I mean, it's not required. Actually, if I take it off, I don't really know what it looks like. I'm always spamming it so much for the guard. But it'd be interesting to run the temple and take it off. But yeah, all the other gear is fairly cheap. And not only is it fairly cheap, but if you are thoughtful about searching for the gear, you can add and remove mods and probably get each piece for less than a divine. You know, I'm sort of towards a min-max version where I'm being picky about the tiers of mods and that having, you know, especially in the suffixes, the mods I want. So these pieces searched as is, they're more than a divine, but not really that much more. So this is an extremely cheap build as is, at least, you know, today, at least right now. So as you saw, you can blink in the middle of the room, hold down right click, it's all done. As you saw in the budget, we're at 150 div with the 2 cornerstone uniques, but you know, a lot cheaper without. And then there's certain things we've done with the build that are different in the other iterations to do this. So let me just kind of go through some of the interactions that are key and that are uncommon. So the first one, and probably the most important one, is blind. So we are socketing blind 2 into Spark, and we're doing that with Pierce 3 and Science Temper. And so what that means is all enemies are pierced, so Spark hits everything in a room pretty quickly, and it is applying blind to everything. Now, once we have blind applied, we can then use the blindside gem everywhere else. And the blindside gem is 15% more crit bonus and 15% more crit chance. That's a more modifier if you're kind of newer to these things. So it's a multiplicative modifier. If this was 15% increase, 15% increase, this would be an unusable gem, but it's a more modifier. And, you know, you don't see it a lot because most people on casters don't immediately think, how do I apply blind like you do on a attack-based build? But we do apply blind, and so then we can use blindside everywhere that we can find a good reason to use it. The other thing we get to do with blind is take this wheel here for only 5 points. We get 12 crit chance, 12 crit chance, 30 crit chance. So that's really, really valuable. This is more, I think it's more crit chance than this whole wheel. And this whole wheel would be more points to acquire. And then when you get to this point in the tree, another thing about this little wheel here, when you get to this point in the tree, it's not very easy to find more crit chance on the tree unless you're able to like come way down here and start looking at some of this stuff. So yeah, getting to take this little wheel here is not nothing. It's a very good additional crit chance additive. I'm going to pause here for a moment and clip in the next section. Okay, I wanted to say a little bit more about blind, and I set up some things in POB to try and demonstrate the difference between using blind and not using blind, and showing that it basically, adds many divines worth of value to the build for just a couple of gems, a couple of support gems, that is, and like no change to gameplay style. So in POB here, and keep in mind the POB for PoE 2 has a lot of unsupported mechanics, and I generally don't use it to try to represent, actual damage numbers or actual defense numbers. I don't think it's reliable for that with min-maxed builds. There's so many unsupported mechanics on items and gems. However, it is good for comparisons. So what does my build look like with this numerically? And then if I make a certain change, then what is the change? What is the relative difference? I think the POB is still pretty powerful for evaluating those things. So here's how we do this in POB. Here's our skill tree as is, and here's our skill gems as is. You can see we've got blind in Spark, and we're going to look at Spell Slinger's Comet with blind slide to understand the relative differences in numbers. And what we'll do is we'll come into the configuration and we'll just toggle on is the enemy blinded, and then we'll see the difference. So right now, without the enemy blinded, the crit chance of Spellslinger Comet is 91, not bad, and our multi is 819. However, with just the blind gem here and the blind side gem here, so we're talking 2 gems in 2 slots where like there's not incredible replacements. You're not losing out on swapping these out in this way on something else that's incredible. So then we're going to talk on is enemy blinded. We get 100% crit chance and 927% crit multi. And I went down here to the custom mods to try to evaluate like what's the equivalency in change. And there's 2 things I'll show. First of all, the equivalent increase in crit chance is more than 60. If we turn on a 60, we go to 100. However, it's actually more than that, but it works for Spark really nicely. So if we say enemy minion blinded and we come into our Spellslinger Comet, you can see that this crit chance is overcapped by 83% increased critical hit chance. So what that really means is that this is like 143% increased critical hit chance value. It's crazy. And that includes, so that's actually more than the gem because that actually includes this little wheel here that I was talking about. Then the other thing is how much bonus is this numerically? And it's around 110% increased critical damage bonus to the gem. So absolutely unbelievable value. And our Spark as well, gains this value, especially the crit chance on Spark when the enemy is blinded is like a really big deal. So right here it's 91, and then if we go is enemy blinded is 99.45. And we have some other like other procs for crit chance, and then there's I don't know if there's headhunter buffs or something like that. There's have you triggered a gem recently, things like that I have checked that have added some of that. But yeah, that is to say that we're at near crit cap on Spark, and we are way over crit cap on our comets when we use the blind effect. And you can kind of see the potency of it in some of these numbers and values here. So hopefully that is really, really helpful to see. Okay, after blind, the next thing I want to talk about is just really the other links I have going on in Spark and in Cast on Crit. And by the way, I'm just going to ignore Frostbomb, Orb of Storms, Elemental Conflux, just like everything that's like just kind of obvious what's going on. Just going to ignore it. There's not many decisions to make, and it doesn't really matter that much. But in the Comets and in the Spark, I am curious if there's a way it could be better. But for me, and after a lot of testing, this is super optimal. So Scion's Temper, if you don't know, I've been kind of talking about it all season. When you cast some Sparks, you gain these wild shards. Eventually, it consumes them to shoot a ton more projectiles. It'll probably do it here. Nope, it'll guarantee it here. Shoot a ton more projectiles and shoot them in a circle. So you get 8 additional proj, and you fire projectiles in a circle. When you cast this really fast with our cast speed, you'll see it goes off a lot. You can see up here and kind of Notice that it's going off about every 1 or 2 seconds. Really, really powerful. The spark here, it does do a good amount of damage, but it's actually more utility, right? We want to apply blind and we want to proc crits, so that way our comets and our lightning bolt get going. Project Cell 2, so you could swap this out with Valentia's propulsion. With what I currently have going on, the Proj speed modifier difference between Proj 3 and Valentia's is not that much. So I go with Proj 3 because you get also a little bit more damage with this. You can see it's 26 and then 30. Whereas with Valentia's, you don't get any added damage. Rapid Casting 2, very solid, very obvious. Pierce 3, this makes it so your spark goes through everything. Don't really worry about the rest of the text. And then Blind 2, obviously, we've talked about. When Blind 2 is gone, my favorite change or different gem was Prolonged Duration. And that is, for the Temple especially. All right, so that's the spark linkages. Let's talk about the comet linkages. Here's the 3 that I think are essential, and then I'm not sure what is best in the 4th slot. So I've got this in the Cast on Crit and in the Spell Slinger. So we have a Comet, a Blindside, Boundless Energy, and Spell Cascade. For Temple especially, I think Spell Cascade is really, really good. If you're outside of the Temple, you could go with like a Conch Effect or something for single target. Not totally sure what's best there. Now up here in the Spell Slinger link up, we have one additional support gem we get to use. So right now I'm going with Cold Mastery because it is like a, unconditional added value to the gem. So let me come in here. I actually haven't done this yet. Swapped out the Cold Mastery and looked at the difference. But if we go to Spell Slinger Comet, Cold Mastery supported, we take it out. 8k damage, and a little bit more cost. It's not incredible, honestly. There's maybe something better here. And the other options, they're just not perfect is the problem. So you can go with Rising Tempest, but this means you're using other different skills. You could go with Concentrated Area, which I've tried. Concentrated Area is a little awkward, especially in the Temple where you just really do want that AoE. You can also go with, what's it called? It's the one that applies no ailments but does a lot more damage. Elemental Focus. But the ailments are kind of nice, and the freeze on the larger targets is pretty strong. So I'm not sure if that's best. Right now, Cold Mastery is my favorite. Unconditional always works, a little bit added damage. There's maybe something better to do there. Now down here in Cast on Crit, we've got the same 3 core ones. However, we remove Cold Mastery because we're saving a slot for Lightning Warp. And if you noticed in my Temple where I blink in the middle and hold down right click, the reason the build jumps around the room and does everything on its own is Lightning Warp. And I've been kind of talking about this skill all season, and have actually gotten into some conversations with folks who don't like it. They think it gets them killed. Just some drawbacks. It has some awkward moments with certain interactions. I just think it's a must. It's absolutely amazing. It's huge quality of life. It applies shock around the room. It takes care of calling enemies for you. It even can close the ground on proximal minions and temporal bubble minions, though it doesn't always do it in the Temple because the spark can't do the damage at that point. But yeah, Lightning Warp, huge quality of life, massive added value. It also queues on monsters, so it doesn't only go off when you have 100% cast on crit energy. You'll see the tooltip on the monster show that it is primed for a Lightning Warp proc. So it just kind of waits for that monster to get into call range, and then it flies over and calls them. And you saw the effect in the showcase of how it bounces around. The last thing is Lightning Bolt. So Lightning Bolt is provided to us from the Choir of the Storm, and basically this skill is going to proc anytime that we have a critical hit. And I think that's how it reads, right? Trigger Lightning Bolt skill on critical hit. There is a cooldown to it, so it's not constant or without some delay. There is a cooldown to the Lightning Bolt, 0.26 seconds. This is scaled by certain things. We've got some on the tree. We got the gem here, and we've got a ring doubling things up here. So each of these is, you might take one off and be like, oh, 0.04 seconds. Are you kidding me? It's not a big deal. But then if you take like everything off, you suddenly realize, okay, we've actually halved the cooldown of this thing. So it's proccing twice as fast. So don't doubt these little things. They're pretty important to this. Again, we've got Blindsight in here for more crit and more crit damage. The spell cascade, I was surprised that it's so good. And every time I take it out, I'm like, what's wrong with this? What's wrong with this skill? It's just really, really valuable. And then the Deliberation, I think, is our best version of unconditional more damage in the slot. I think you can get this into a 5-link. I think there's like Corrupted or maybe double Corrupted Choir of the Storms with level 20 lightning bolts. And I'm guessing they're like crazy expensive. Let me see if I can price check one of these really quick. Search. Let's take that off. Doesn't exist. It either doesn't exist or my search thing is not able to do this. Could be one or the other. But I think they do exist, and I think they're brutally expensive. So it's just another thing that like you're saving a ton of budget in the build, and all you're losing is 1 gem. Although that 1 gem would be pretty nice. Okay, those are the only links that I'm going to cover in depth. The other ones you see on here, just slot in the things that you see. This is not required on Blink. I'm just hanging on to this because why would I trade this for Divines when there's inflation going on? And it's just nice utility for, testing things out. The last thing I'll say, because it does apply to gem links, is that if you're running a Sceptre that provides you an aura resist gem, so it doesn't apply to Malice and some other things, but if it's an aura resist gem, you get free spirit links here. So these gems do not add to the spirit cost of my build, even though they should. And this has been bugged since .1. I don't know. I think it's a bug, right? They just don't fix it. But here we have Mysticism. More damage for on full energy shield is actually really good. 40% increase. Cannibalism is recovering life on kill. Incredible, actually. Fatality 2, it's fine. Herbalism actually increases the guard that we get from Olroth and the recovery that we get from Olroth by a ton. So these 4 links are really good, and you can put them if you have Purity of Fire, Purity of Lightning, whatever the Chaos one is called, or Purity of Ice. Okay, so with that, I'm going to transition and talk about itemization a bit, and we will start with the Guiding Palm. Now, let me say, if you're not going to go with the Gloom Shrine Guiding Palm, then it's very flexible what you want to use. And let me pull up that Gloom Shrine one. Let's see what this costs right now. 84 div. That's actually come down quite a bit, especially when you consider inflation. So I may look at like what's the viability of my build swapping over to this. But yeah, the reason I'm using the cold one is simply because it solved my cold resist for me, which was the most ideal. And you got to think about it this way. With Choir of the Storm, your lightning res is solved. Like 100 plus is very easy to get. So then it's like, do you want to solve cold with the Sceptre, or fire with the Sceptre, or chaos with the Sceptre? Now, if you solve it with cold or fire, it only costs like 100 exalt. Like this thing is nearly free. Obviously, if you solve chaos with it and add the Gloom Shrine effect, which is really powerful, you're at over 80 div. Suddenly the budget is nearly doubled. But basically, you take a cold or fire here. If you want to take a fire, oh gosh, what is it called? Sacred Flame. Highly recommend you go with the Sacred Flame, which will give you a massive amount of extra damage. You can gain as much as 70% of damage as extra fire. It's saying these are really, really expensive, but let's see if we can say, let's just do like a 60%. I bet it's pretty cheap. Yeah, 10 div for a 60%. So that's going to be like 30 plus more than the Guiding Palm Fire Sceptre will give you. Maybe that's not a smart budget choice for you. You can kind of decide. But what you're getting from the Sceptre slot is 100 to 120 spirit, depending on what you do with the sockets. And then you're getting a purity skill for resist solving and for the free support gems. So that's kind of how you want to look at this slot. If you want to try out other things with other meta spirit gems, then you could get a rare Sceptre that gives you like 170 plus spirit. And then you lose the damage is extra cold type effect. But yeah, it's really up to you. And that's like a big tech that you have a ton of flexibility. Because as soon as you have this and as soon as you have this, you only need to solve like one of the resist on your gear. And so you can see on my gear, I don't really have a lot of other resists at all. I've just got some chaos and some fire. And that is because of this right here, which is another huge cost-saving, massive value add piece to the build. I've got the Warrior with 5 what are these called? Rabbit idols for 25 more rarity. But think about what this solves if we don't use the rabbit idols. You basically don't need resists on your other gear pieces if you have this and this and this. The chaos res is a bit of a luxury. I don't think you really need to be overcapped on chaos, especially in the temple, but even outside of the temple. And then the all elemental res is also a luxury because you could solve this over here on this gear as well and not worry as much about rarity, crit, and all that. So, it's another piece of gear, like with the Sceptre, it's another piece of gear where you can decide what you want to solve for the budget that you want to spend. I've got the all attributes here, which is giving me ultimately a little bit of life because, it's 5 life per socket or 5 strength per socket, but it also saves me int and dex on the tree, which I can, link back up to strength for even more life. The really expensive version of this is actually not the attributes, it's the global defenses, and I think that one is super expensive. This one I snagged for like between 5 and 10 divs, a day or two ago. So in today's money, that's maybe like 10 or 20 divs. I don't know. It just depends. The money is changing fast. The other gear pieces is just rare stuff. What mod do you want? So on boots, I'm maxed out on damage in the temple, so I'm just going for max speed and rarity. So I've got, 40 move, some energy shield, some rarity. Gloves, same thing. We've got rarity, we've got crit, we got max life. I went for the increased effect to socketed items, so that way we get 12% cast speed. Helmet, same thing. We got rarity, we got crit, we got max life, some energy shield. These were all fairly cheap, and I was overspending, right? I didn't need to use these. Let's see if I still have my old gear. Yep. I was using these 3. These were from the campaign. You can see the required levels is all under 72. These were from the interlude, and they were like, I don't know, just a handful of exalts, and the build was fine. It was still smashing. I was using the Sceptre in the interlude, build was smashing. I was using Series Acuity in the interlude, build was smashing. These gloves, I think, by the way, are overrated. I don't think you need the instant leech at all. So yeah, that is to say I overspent in these slots, and you don't have to. Now in the ring, there are 2 things that are really big. If you want rarity, the ring is a spot where you can get a prefix and a suffix, and then you can double it with a Calandra's Touch, which should be pretty cheap right now. Yeah, less than a div for Calandra's. You gotta love it. So yeah, we have double rarity, and then you've got this cooldown recovery rate Kurgal modifier. Now this modifier, I think you can pretty much add on yourself with pretty deterministic methods, but let's double check. So if we go to jewelry and rings, and we come down here to Kurgal modifiers, here it is right here, and there are a total of 5 of them. So if you slam this with a, whatever omen does the jewelry, I think it's a collarbone, right? And then spec in the omen that guarantees Kurgal, which is black-blooded, and then use an echoes. Surprised I don't have one. Oh, there they are. Using echoes, you're almost guaranteed to hit this on a 6 swap. So that's pretty easy to add on in your search filter. You could search for something with an empty suffix. You could search for anything that has a desecrated suffix and replace it with Omen of Light. That is to say that if you queue up this ring in a filter as is, it might be extremely expensive, but there are ways that you can patch together that Kurgal modifier, which is probably the outlying modifier, making this thing cost so much more. We talked about Chaos Res. It can be solved in a lot of different places, and I think solving it is optional. Okay, the last piece to talk about, and this one is probably like, has the highest variance for how much do you want to spend. I was previously using one, I think sold. I was previously using this one, and this one is for a Stormweaver. It is it's a big overspend for Stormweaver because you get that mana cost efficiency on there, and it's a perfect roll. And then before that, I was using this 8 diver, which is basically just cold skills and cold damage. And this is again from the campaign. This is overpriced by a lot. So I was using that, and the build was still smashing. I only say that because this one's expensive. I think this was like 30 div, and I maybe re-rolled the Desecration. Can't quite remember how I got to this one. But you can get away with a, multi-exalt or even just a few div wand. The important modifiers, the 4 spell skills and the spell slinger. After that, a damage as extra is helpful, but not required. Spell damage is helpful, not required. Lightning damage, helpful, not required. You can roll a lot of crit hit chance for spells, and I only have a tier 3 here. I think this goes up into the 70s. So that's the one modifier that if you're shopping these, I would target that modifier as something that's really, really important. More important than the others. These 3 charms I think are all best in slot and super OP. Highly recommend them. Mana Flask is useless. Don't even need it. And once again, Headhunter, not essential for the build. I think at the end I'm going to do a demo of taking off Headhunter, taking off Olroths, and we'll just see how things go. Okay, last thing I want to talk about a bit is the skill tree. Come on, you. So I think there's a ton of flexibility in the skill tree, and when I go on PoE Ninja and I look at, Spark, Mage Bloods, what is it? What are we called? What is this thing called? Whatever this thing is. I'm a bit sick, sorry. I see a lot of variants in the skill tree. One variant I see is there's a couple of ways to get blood magic. And so if you don't need blood magic, you can basically disappear from this side of the tree starting from here. Really starting from here because you want this jewel socket, right? And you want storm charged. But if you wanted to disappear from this side of the tree, you could take a From Nothing Bomb and grab the storm charge and a few others and then disappear from this side of the tree. And then those builds I see come down here and they grab acceleration, which is crazy. They grab the jewel here. They grab cooked, which is massive crit damage bonus, very valuable. They come in here and they grab the rabbit thing, damage lucky, really, really good. And then they come all the way down here and they grab crystallized immunity for chill immune, and they grab gem enthusiast because it's friggin' amazing. So there's a lot. That is all to say there's a lot of variance in the skill tree. This, I think, is completely primed and perfect down to the single point for what I'm doing, which is a level 97, refined budget approach to this cast on crit blood mage, which is what I was trying to say earlier, blood mage. And every single point is exactly where it needs to be. The only thing, so there's 2 places I think if you want to do it differently, here's what you could do. I'm opting for more ES in this chain here, but one method is to take 4 stat points and then save, I think, 3 skill points overall. Which could be useful. And then the other is I'm opting for the proj speed here, which again, because we are running Excel 3, proj speed is damage. Proj speed is also the speed at which we apply blind and reproc crits. So, there is a crit delay timer. There's a crit proc delay timer built into Spark, but it's not so long that you have no value in the proj speed. It's pretty valuable. And then again with Energy Shield, I am investing in Energy Shield, and I think you could go without investing in Energy Shield. You also could get more ES on the gear. So yeah, I think the one flexibility, if you want to say there is flexibility, would be to have less Energy Shield or less proj speed, and then invest elsewhere. Otherwise, at level 97, we're grabbing every significant node that changes, our numbers in terms of damage pretty dramatically. And we're also, cooldown recovery is so important for Blink and for Lightning Storm. So that's kind of why we're investing in that. As far as the jewels go, for the blue jewels, you really just want crit chance, crit bonus. If you can get Energy Shield on there, that is nice. The ES is a prefix, and the crit stuff is suffix. Now you can double dip on crit chance or crit bonus because there's a spell specific one and then a non-spell specific one. So you could get 30 crit chance on a jewel, or you could get 40 crit bonus, or you can go hybrid. The point of saying that is that there's a lot of flexibility. Another way you can save a lot of money on those jewels, because they probably are in high demand. What's my filter here? So these are perfect rolls. A perfect roll is 4 div. However, if you take off the perfect roll, it's 1 exalt. And then what you can do, look at this one. This is cool. Now, this one has pen cold for your comet. You can buy a 1 Exalt one and then Divine it. The Divine Orb will reroll the mods. You have a pretty good chance of upgrading it and saving a Divine or two, maybe getting even luckier. The other thing about divining it is, the more expensive search with the perfect mods doesn't have other mods it cares about. It's just going for the 2 for 2. And so in these additional mods on them are stupid, right? Minions, area effect curses, presence, pen cold. Don't get too attracted to that. It's not too important. But if you are going to divine it yourself, you could do something like add energy shield and search it without any ranges. And we're still at, really cheap. Now we're at 200 Exalt. And we have a 3 mod with Cold Pen. You might be able to find 3 mod with some type of increased damage or triggered spell damage, something good. And then again, you can divine it yourself. So just mentioning that, a lot of people will search these maybe with a filter I provided. And they'll look for, the perfect jewel and be like, oh my God, those jewels are 5 divine each. Well, they don't have to be 5 or in this case, 15, 20 divine each. You can buy the cheap one. The one with the 3 mod here was, 200 Exalt or something, and then slam it with a couple of divines to get it into a reasonable place. The Heart of the Well, I don't know how important the Heart of the Well is in general. Sometimes I thought, a blue jewel might actually be better, or like one that's just damages extra might be better. The chance for lightning damage to be lucky, I don't know how important this is. Obviously, we use Bolt and Spark, but the main of our damage comes from the comets and honestly the lightning warp for the call. So it is hard to say. I don't think it's that important though. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to say with the build. I hope it's helpful. If you have questions on items and skills or thoughts or suggestions to make this even better, please drop them here. I've been given so much life and energy every season by how much everyone helps contribute to these builds, and I look forward to learning the things that I don't know after I make a video, because I'm still kind of new to PoE and I still kind of suck at it. So looking forward to everyone's comments, questions, recommendations, and suggestions. The last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to end this clip, and then I'm going to clip on a showcase in the temple with no Headhunter and no Oroth, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, I wanted to record one additional section that I hadn't initially planned, and it has to do with Blink. So Blink in these builds is really awesome. However, there's something a little bit buggy and annoying about Blink that I think is new this season, or maybe it was there last season, but it wasn't there in .2 and .1, I don't think, because I used Blink then and it was fine. And that is this small little sprint animation that happens after you blink. Watch it here. See how my character kind of lunges forward a little bit? It's really weird, and you get kind of staggered. And if you blink into a wall, I mean, it's like a nightmare. It's really weird how bad it is, or if you blink into an object. The other thing is you can't just like sprint at will. When you blink, your blink has to begin the sprint, as far as I know. Let me know if there's something like with controller or other binds that can change that. So this was really annoying at first, but I want to say that I have a solution for it, or at least something that I do in gameplay which makes it not so noticeable. And that is, number one, do a little, first of all, your blink, don't hit your roll button, which for me is spacebar, and hold it down. Just do a quick tap like this, boop, and that's it. And you can see it reduces that little animation quite a bit. If you hold it down, you get a little bit of goofiness. You see that? But if you just quick tap, it's really nice. And then sometimes it happens even when you're quick tapping, or there's like a tiny stagger in there. And what I do is just click a spark after I blink. Blink spark. And it's like really smooth. See that? And then the last thing I'll say is sometimes you want to sprint. Our cooldown's pretty quick, but because we don't have Temporalis, it's not instant. And so sometimes you want to sprint. So if I have a line where I know there's no obstructions and I want to sprint it, that is the only time I will blink and hold down my spacebar and do a continuous sprint. And you can actually chain them together. But of course, if there's obstacles or monsters, you don't want to do this. But you can see you can sprint and blink, and you can quick tap sprint without the stagger being too much of an issue. You just got to be, a little bit careful about how you're doing it, and not so sloppy. So yeah, I wanted to drop that in here because I know that's been a frustration for a lot of people with Blink, especially those who haven't used it before. So hopefully that's helpful. All right, here comes a real and raw demo, man. So I've not tested this myself, but what I am claiming is that this is a budget build. So I'm going to drop most of the money out of the build, basically. Hopefully I have enough decks to do this. But here's the 3 changes we're going to make. So we're going to take the 3 most expensive parts of the build. The Olroths, which is, it was 80 just earlier. I don't know what's going on with prices, man. Who knows? Olroths, which is 70 to 80. Headhunters, which are like 40. And then my wand, which is like, depending on how you search, it could be like a 30 div wand. So we're dropping almost the entire budget out of the build. We're going to run this absolute nothing burger of a wand. This thing is so crappy. I actually might need to do a little better than this. I just realized that's chaos skills instead of all skills. Let me see if I got one in here. It's so bad. I don't even have one in here. Okay, we'll try it. We'll try one that bad. I don't even think I'll have the gems for Spell Slinger. Boop. Boop. Cascade. We'll go Boundless. Okay. And we're going to swap out Olroths for a blue flask. This is item level 78. That's going to be painful. And then we'll see if this bricks my stats. I think this might brick my dex, which would be a bummer. I have to go to town. Yeah, it bricked my dex by 1 gem, so we can save that somewhere useless. Let's pull out the overabundance on orb, and we're good. Actually, let's keep that. Let's pull out the cooldown on Frostbomb, because we might actually need these utility spells. We'll see. We'll see how badly this goes. Okay, so resist wise, we're still set, but we will have no headhunter buffs. We have no Olroth's Resolve, which I think is the most important. And our wand is just absolute garbage. It may be so bad that I have to like throw this wand on, but okay, we're going in the temple. This is a raw temple run. I've got this lot. The commander's here just to see if I don't lose this, because right now there's a little bug where the temple is closing even though you don't hit the close button. Don't know if anyone else experienced that. It's basically awful. So yeah, this should be markedly worse, but we have really gone down in power level here, man. So if this still works, even at this power level, I think it really shows like the value of the build. And again, the Olroth's going to be the biggest thing. That Olroth's Resolve is so valuable, it's crazy. Oh hey, I'd love to see that. Loot. I would say it's working. We're not going to scale very nicely because there's no headhunter buffs. I would say it's working, and the wand swap is like just devastating because I accidentally put on a chaos wand. But yeah, that room just cleared pretty quickly. Let me throw on just the wand, because yeah, I think with the wand swap, the +4 to skills around the board is so important. With the wand swap, I think it'll be like, really smooth. And again, Olroth's the biggest thing. Look at my energy shield gone. That's so scary. That never happens with Olroth because the guard protects your ES. And then we have some max ES stats, so yeah. All right, it's a little sus without Olroth, but you can see that you can take off Olroth, and you can take off Headhunter, and you can even put on the worst wand imaginable, like a 1 Exalt wand. Within it have 4 dead mods and a 15 spell slinger and no spell skill socket. -5 all spell skills, and the build still cleared a super juiced temple room. It could have cleared the whole temple. It would be, markedly slower, but hopefully this is an honest enough demo to say you can strip the build of almost the entirety of its budget and it's still really solid. Okay, thank you.